Do you want to tell us about the project that I know you did on non-custodial parents?
Yes, yeah. So that was part of a large scale project where I interviewed 40 non custodial parents, 20 of them being dads and 20 of them being moms. In every case, the parents that I interviewed were post divorce. So I was talking about a family situation in which, okay, you used to have a quote unquote nuclear family system.
Hmm.
Now that has changed because of the divorce. So we were able to talk a little bit about the before and after. And what I was interested in was how they define what it means to be a parent, right? And if that definition for them had shifted at all now that they are a non-custodial parent, and if so, kind of how that shifted for them. And I was also interested in, based on their understanding of what it means to be a parent and based on the context from which they're parenting in, right? They have less physical time with their children. In some cases, they have less say over things like education and medical care and services. How they go about actually parenting their children. What does that look like for them?
How did you find people who would be willing to be interviewed about this?
That's a great question. When I said I was going to study non-residential parents, people were like, you're never going to find those people. And I really reject limiting our research based on who we think we're going to be able to access, because then we're not really asking the questions that we want to ask necessarily. So I did a lot of posting of flyers around my community in Milwaukee. I used a lot of social media, Facebook, Twitter, Craigslist, which was still a thing then. I don't know if people are still using Craigslist now, but perhaps TikTok would be the more up and coming means for me to be able to do that. And just put out the call. I shared it. I asked other people to share it. I joined some support groups on Facebook with permission for parents that were non-residential and non-custodial. And I got a lot of people that way. I feel like people that want to share their story are motivated to find ways to share their story.
So they get something out of it, would you say?
I had a very small grant, so I was able to give gift cards to those participants. So they did get a little something monetarily that way. A lot of them asked me to just send them in cards to their kids, which I did, which I thought was a really nice, sweet gesture. But I think besides that, I think there's a lot of release and some catharsis that comes from being able to share our stories, especially when it's around something that's challenging and sometimes stigmatized by society, especially for mothers. Wait, you're a mother and you don't have full custody of your kids all the time. Oh, what did you do wrong? Right. And in a lot of cases, they didn't do anything wrong. Yet there's a stigma associated with that.
Right. So I'm imagining you found a lot of pain about that. Did parents report to you that I know this is how people see me, and or whatever you want to tell us about your results? But I wonder about that pain that they might feel.
Yeah, there was definitely more pain associated with stigma from the mothers than I interviewed than from the fathers. Fathers more so emphasized what they tried to do to stay involved. I think because there's the stigma of the deadbeat dad, that like, here are the ways that I try to participate on a consistent and regular basis. And some of those were financial things, paying child support or buying new shoes because they need shoes. But I found that for both the fathers and the mothers, their description of their parenting went far beyond what traditional gender roles say is the motherly duty and the fatherly duty. Moms were talking about disciplining and providing financially. Dads were talking about nurturing and giving social support. And so I think there's a lot more depth to parenting than what society has given credit to over the years in terms of kind of gendering it in ways that are limiting. Probably one of the most jarring things that I found And this did not happen for every participant, but I had some that were very explicit about it. And then once it came to my attention, then I could see some of those threads in some of the other interviews as well. I had a couple of parents tell me that it would have been easier for them to process their parenting situation if their children had died.
Ooh.
And those were typically situations in which there was a lot of conflict between them and their co-parent. And so there was a lot of hostility and a lot of pressure and a lot of disconnect between themselves and their child. And so there was a constant kind of struggle around, I want this to be different. I don't know how I can make this different. I'm trying to do the best that I can, but I feel like I don't have enough access. So I think there was a constant state of grieving around their child that's actually still there. And I think that's where that sentiment came from. But when I first had a parent tell me that, I about fell off my chair. Like, it was just so shocking to me. But such an honest revelation of the level of their pain.
It reminds me of the notion of ambiguous loss, right? That the child is still in my life and I still have obligations, but my child's not here in my life anymore. And so I don't know how to, deal with the fact that they're gone, because they're not really gone. Yeah. Oh, that's so sad. So sad. What do parents say about the difference between, before and after?
A lot of the focus on that was based on the logistical limitations that they have now that they didn't have before, right? Okay. When you're living pretty much 24/7 in the same household with your child, you have basically unlimited access to them, right? You pretty much know where they are. You know how to get in contact with them. You have conversations with them throughout the day. And then all of a sudden they felt like, all right, that was sort of taken from me. In some cases, not because I wanted to be the non-residential parent, but I just ended up that way. And so now how do I try to create those opportunities for those connections when I don't have the opportunity to just come down and sit at the breakfast table with them? Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of talk about utilizing technology to stay connected to their children so that, they're not here, but I can still say good morning, and I can still, talk about this TV show because I'm watching it and they're watching it, and we're live texting during the television show.
That's sweet. So a lot more thoughtfulness about how to parent and use of technology in parenting, which is kind of it's doesn't fit with our traditional ideas of how parenting happens. So that's interesting. Mm-hmm. It also strikes me that your interviews were so profoundly emotional. I mean, when you talked about it would be easier if my child had died kind of thing, contrasting that with trying to figure out how to use FaceTime so we can watch a TV show together. One seems so trivial and one seems so profound, and yet they're popping up here in the same interview. That's really interesting. What did you discover about co-parenting relationships post-divorce?
I went in a little naive thinking that I'm studying parent-child relationships. And then, maybe 5 interviews into my 40 interviews, I realized I can't do that if I'm not also studying the co-parenting relationship, because it impacts so much of their parenting experience that I just would miss the whole thing if I didn't take into consideration that relationship. Wow. And so the quality of the co-parenting relationship impacts the quality of the parent-child relationship in a lot of cases.
Yeah, that makes sense that it would. So do parents sabotage one another's relationships with their kids or interfere, gatekeep, and that sort of thing? Is that what kinds of things you saw?
Yeah, I had some that had really positive relationships with their co-parents, and for the most part had relatively positive parenting experiences. Right? They still felt frustrations and challenges, but it's like, I feel like I can get past that. I have a partner that we're working on this together. in the case where that was not so, where the co-parenting relationships were much more hostile, that became a lot more challenging. So gatekeeping behaviors, they also reported feeling like the other parent was monitoring their communication. So either listening into phone calls or looking at text messages or checking emails. And so they felt like, I can't really participate to the degree that I want to participate, because either I'm not allowed in, or I'm in, but I feel like I'm being watched. So I'm not necessarily being my full self.
Okay.
I really value interviewing as a research method. I think it's something that as a researcher, it takes time to really become comfortable as an interviewer. Because there's a certain amount of things you can't control about being with another human being in real time, in terms of, are they going to, go off on a tangent, or are they going to understand my question, or what are they going to think about my questions? And I see that a lot with graduate students who do interviews for the first time. There's a lot of anxiety around it. But I think once you kind of step into that and get some experience and just let yourself kind of roll with, I'm a human being and they're a human being and things happen, so let's do this. I think there's a lot of value in hearing other people share their experiences.